My name is Cheryl Costa. I'm a resident of upstate New York. I'm a journalist for the Syracuse New Times, and I'm a talk show host on KCOR Digital Radio. This conversation I wanted to have with you about the issue of consciousness as it regards to the UFO community. I grew up in a clairvoyant family. Clairvoyance runs down the maternal side of my family. On down the paternal side, my father's side of the family, an interest and a focus into shamanism from North Africa runs down the family. So needless to say, myself and my siblings got kind of a double whammy of awareness. And since the early days of my studying of UFOs back in the late 1960s, I became aware acutely that ESP, telepathy, and just the whole general consciousness stuff was an important issue with regards to UFOs. These days, here we are 40 or 50 years later, I have been a practicing Wiccan for 40 years. I lived almost 10 years in a Buddhist monastery. I'm an ordained Buddhist monastic. And the one thing I have come to understand is the idea that we as beings are not what we see here in the flesh. Okay, we are. I am the being behind this mask of flesh and these eyes. Okay, I am immortal. I've had many names, but I have none. I've had millions of lifetimes, and everyone is like this. Okay, and that our creative spark, the God spark, the force, whatever you want to call it, is within each one of us. It is our life force. And that life force is not separate from the great consciousness, the all that is, the great mind, as the Buddhists call it. We are connected to everything, everyone, everywhere, every when. It crosses, time does not exist in the context of our living essence and our living souls. And that's where UFOlogy, I think, needs to get away from the nuts and bolts side of things a little bit and start looking at consciousness. Because while I can go to another country and two people with two different languages can't talk to each other, if we have any amount of intuitive quality between us, we can get the message across on a nonverbal level. And I think that's I think the ETs are waiting for us to wake up a little bit more. And the evidence that I've seen is people who have been touched by ET, experiencers, abductees, that sort of thing. We've all turned into mystics. It's weird. It's these people find themselves in a situation. I've known people who were completely atheist or agnostic about faith subjects matter. Suddenly they're spiritual. I know people were hellfire and brimstone Bible thumpers, and suddenly they're a little less dogma and they're more spiritual. I've seen everything across the board of people that suddenly have one of these experiences and suddenly they're, excuse the expression, tree hugging, almost new age view type people. And of course, because I did live 7 years in a Buddhist monastery, I have a handle on meditation and quieting yourself and everything. And there's a lot to be said to quieting yourself. And of course, our culture doesn't want to quiet you. We've got TV blaring at you on 1,000 channels. We got radio coming through your phone. We have all kinds of social media coming through your phone. And people don't have time to have that introspection time to listen to that little voice in their heart, which is the connection to everything. And that's a shame. But if you truly, truly want to be connected and understand this whole thing with ET, you really need to start looking at the idea of being connected. and learning to quiet yourself. And you don't have to meditate like, like a Buddhist temple for hours and hours. Give yourself 2 minutes a day, 2 to 5 minutes a day. Don't try for longer. Just give me 2 minutes a day of quietness. If you have to do it on the throne, do it there. Just quiet yourself and just clear the thoughts in your head. Don't worry about the car, the dog, the kids, the house. Just 2 minutes alone with your thoughts. I think it's important that people learn to quiet themselves. I'm sorry if you think, well, I don't believe in Buddhism. You don't have to believe in Buddhism. Just accept the premise that your soul essence, your spiritual essence is connected to everything, everywhere. And if you look at Christian doctrine, one of the great commandments is love thy God as thyself, or with all your heart. Okay. And then a second part of that is love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, E.T. is a neighbor. Might be a long ways neighbor, but he's a neighbor. Okay. And by quieting yourself, you might just open your heart enough that your neighbor might speak to you. And a lot of people who have been experiencers have had some after they got past their fears and everything, have had wonderful experiences with those folks. And this is an important thing. And if we're going to have disclosure, it's going to have to be at a grassroots level, and it's going to have to be with more people reaching out with their heart, with joy in their heart, an invitation in their heart. Come, be with us. Come, break bread with us. Come, join us. And ET will come. And we've heard many people from the CE5 or Close Encounters 5 community say, you send out bright wishes of greetings. They show up and they dance around in the sky. So this seems to be the one thing that anybody can do. If you learn to meditate a little bit, a couple of minutes worth of quieting a day, it makes a difference. Just 2 to 5 minutes a day. Don't try and sit there for an hour. I'd rather have, as a monk, I'm telling you, I'd rather have 2 minutes of good meditation than 45 minutes of struggling. Okay? Don't be macho about it. Just learn to do 2 to 5 minutes. And if you get good at it, you can do it 2 to 5 minutes in the morning, do 2 to 5 minutes a little bit before bedtime. Fine, great, do it. The more often you do it, the better it is. I find it grounds me from all the goofy stuff that goes on in the day. It gives me a couple of minutes of peace. Okay. And yes, I lived in a Buddhist monastery, and yes, I can do 35, 40 minutes of meditation. But for the most part, my most effective meditation is 2 to 7 minutes worth of meditation. Sometimes I'll take a couple of minutes from my computer. I'll step away, sit down on a stool or someplace, and just quiet myself for a few minutes, center myself, and just let go of all stress. And you'd be surprised how settled you become. Used to be everybody went to church. Most everybody went to church, some faith or another. Okay. And there have been people falling away from the faiths. Okay. They just got sick of the rules and the dogma and all of that. A lot of people, most of the mainstream faiths here in the United States, I've got a friend of mine who's a chaplain, a college chaplain, and she told me quite literally, we are hemorrhaging from the pews. We are losing people left and right. But are they completely going away from spirituality? No, they're joining faiths like Wicca. Suddenly this year, the New York Times this past December, December of 2018, had an article that said that there are now more Wiccan witches in the United States than there are the United Church of Christ, Presbyterians. So people are coming back to spirituality, but they're not doing it through the rote verse structure of the traditional Christian Judeo faiths. And that's a shame. There's some richness in those traditions, but I think they got too full of themselves. And I think that's what people see is the hypocrisy in the public face and administration of the faiths. Okay, if you go really into the Bible, there's plenty of wonderful teachings, but people seem to just want to go in there, pull out a few phrases, and beat somebody over the head, beat the gays over the head, beat women over the head, beat other colors over the head, and that's wrong. Okay, because if you look at the greater book and you look at the greater story, the general story is love God, the great, if nothing else, the great consciousness, whatever face of God you want to put on it. Okay. In the Hindu faith, they have 33 million gods. They all say it's Brahma. It's that one core God, but different aspects, different faces of God to suit everyone. And I think that an all-loving God would give us a friendly face for whatever we perceive we want God to be. And I think people are embracing that kind of a viewpoint. And I think they're also embracing the idea of this connectiveness with other people. We've got too much divisiveness in our cultures. And like Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. All your neighbors. Don't tell me, oh, but those people don't count. Okay. I hear a lot of people saying that these days. The immigrants don't count, or the blacks don't count, or the gays don't count. Everybody counts. Every living thing counts. So here we have that connectiveness with sentient beings, but we also are supposed to have connectiveness with the other creatures of the earth. God created them too, or the great creator, great maker, whatever you want to call it, created them too. So we need to develop this deep spirituality, not necessarily deep dogma. That's my viewpoint. I mean, I'm technically an Orthodox Tibetan Buddhist, but I talk very much like a Zen, or I talk very much like a very liberal Tibetan Galupa tradition, which is very reformed. Um, Nothing has to be painted in stone when it comes to your beliefs. Cut yourself some. I have one Lama whose attitude is, don't beat yourself up, cut yourself some slack, but don't let yourself get away with murder. Okay? Just relax, enjoy it, and embrace something and let it fill you. And the best way to let it fill you is to meditate a little bit every day, 2 to 5 minutes a day. It's an easy discipline. I know people say, oh, I'm too busy. You don't have to go to a temple. Like I said, you can just go over there and sit on a stool and do it. You can go in on the throne in the bathroom, close the door, and have 2 minutes of peace. That's all. And that's the message. And people, one, it will make your life better. You'll probably feel better about things. Maybe over time, your awareness will spike up a little bit, and you might become aware of a bigger world around you, like my cousins and I see. There are many things around us that most people do not see. And one of my lamas in Buddhist temples told me most people just need to expand their reality a little bit. And people say, well, ETs are, oh, they just come down here in flying saucers. They've been walking among us for years. We're just not psychologically aware of them. And that's the truth. And I think people, that's my big message. If you want to be connected in UFOlogy, start quieting yourself and be connected to all that is. That's all. It's as simple as that. We tend to view UFOs in a physical manifestation context. I talk to people in the UFO community who want to crawl into the cockpit of that UFO and look at how they fly it and what the controls look like. I've had more than one engineer say, I want a tour of their engine room. They're strictly looking at the physical manifestation of it. Okay? And how are they going to respond when they realize that some of these ships are probably living entities into themselves and are conscious and sentient? Okay? It's a big, that's what I mean by expanding your reality. There are things you need to be, don't limit what you can believe can exist, because there's things out there that exist that if I told you about, you would think I was ravingly crazy. I've talked to other mystics and they say, yeah, I deal with that all the time. You know, see, there are people walking around on this world who have opened their awareness up are aware of far more things. And there's a great line from Shakespeare: there are far more things in heaven and earth, you know, and it's the truth. But most people have this little tunnel vision of what they think reality is. And they go through the motions of day-to-day life like felt like they're in a stage play following a script. And life isn't meant to be like that. That's the only advice I can give. As far as how will it affect your view of UFOlogy, if you expand your reality, then you might be willing to accept some of the more outlandish ideas you hear. And I'm not talking conspiracy theory. So I know people who do not believe they're from these things are from another part of the galaxy, or they're maybe from another galaxy, or they're from interdimensional beings. And people ask me, well, what do you think, Cheryl? And I think all of the above. Just because we don't know how to do it doesn't mean they don't know how to do it. And of course, there are the cynical people that seem to think that, them talking to us would be like us talking to the mice, and it's not necessarily like that. We're thinking, sensitive, and usually caring individuals, most of us. And if you open your heart to them, eventually there's going to be enough of us who are opening their heart to them that they're going to say, okay, now we can talk to these people. I think the people they've already talked to are the people they have had experiencing and what we call abductions. I think it's just the abduction thing gets overblown about what, for years, all I've ever heard. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was at a UFO Congress, and I had asked, because I was press, I was forbidden to be at the experiencers meeting. It was like a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning every day at the conference, right? For experiencers to come in and share their stories. And after a couple of years of not being a go there, I went to the psychologist who acted like a moderator for it. And I said, look, I'll leave my press passes upstairs and I'll forget I'm a journalist. I'm not going to out anybody. I'd just like to come and learn. Because I have been exposed to the same stuff like on the upper cable channels, oh, I got abducted, I got probed, they did this, they did that, And I said, oh, can I just come and listen? I have expected to go in and meet 35 or 40 people crying in their coffee that they got probed, okay? Or they got stuck with an implant or something. I get into this meeting of the experiencers, and there was 175 people in there, and this meeting had all the energy of a tent revival. It was up. It was excited. Wow, those off-worlders are cool. It completely opened my eyes to a different reality, that maybe this isn't what we're being told, that contact with the ETs is a negative experience. And Whitley Strieber has shown us that it's much bigger than we think it is. John Mack has said it's much bigger than we think it is. And so that's what I think the benefit is. Open your mind a little bit. You don't have to believe in every conspiracy theory out there. I don't believe in every conspiracy theory out there. But in the idea of consciousness and the idea of a spiritual connection to other beings of intelligence and compassion, I'm a firm believer in that. There's been evidence of people who have been cured by the ETs. There's been a lot of evidence of that. And the free people, the Edgar Mitchell Foundation people, they've got lots of documented evidence of people who said that, when after they touched, they went from whatever they were to becoming a very spiritual, almost mystical individual. Something to this. Numbers don't lie. I'm a statistician, so that's all I have to offer. I think I'll give you an example and talk about how this fills you. I have my college degree is in the arts, and it was achieved later in life. Okay, in high school, I graduated in the bottom quarter of my class. I was not a math person. And people who I went to school with, when we published our book of statistics, and said, Cheryl, where did that come from? And we sometimes hear people in the creative arts say, well, sometimes there's this divine kiss, so to speak. Like I had this esoteric download from someplace, and it was suddenly I could do this. Okay. And that, I think, is the important thing. There have been too many instances where you talk to a playwright or a composer or an artist, and they say, I know it's a lovely piece. Thank you very much. I didn't, while I did the work, um, it came from someplace else. And this is a good example of what I'm going to call the esoteric download from other loving beings who want to create something beautiful and let you be the mechanism to make it, you know. And there's lots of examples of this in our culture if you look at it, especially child prodigies, these 5-year-old kids that are playing Mozart like concert pianists, uh, that is esoteric download. And we've got enough examples of it, and it should make people bigger believers that there's something bigger outside of ourselves.